Here we go. Here we go. You guys coming in? You guys are coming in. Let's see. Let's see if I can zoom in on this. Welcome, one and all. Hello. Hi, Lucas, Carrie. Welcome. Welcome. I'll hold off. Hold off until more people come in. Let me change the background. Hi, Chris. Good to see you. Actually, I'm going to change some of the, still says Bible every morning. Let's go to This Way Network. Good enough. There we go. And you guys want to hear me sing? You guys want to hear me sing? Morning, Mitch. Good to see you. No more singing? Should I sing? I'll wait. Maybe, yeah, I'll finish. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll sing this and then I'll finish my notes. And hey, it's Christmas. Christmas coming. All right, I'm gonna sing. Enough of you are in here. Oh, okay. Everybody's in here. I like this. Good. I did was getting scratchy. I should get some water. Oh well. Here we go. Now this is a song that I learned early on. I think like the very first year I became a Christian in 1988. So maybe some of you have heard it, maybe not. But this is one that stuck with me. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence, O Lord, and take not your Holy Spirit from me. Restore unto me the joy of thy salvation, and renew a right spirit within me. That was back at the second half of line 10 was the final line. There. Nado girl. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, I'm singing scripture. I'm singing the word of the Lord. In fact, I just now realized that this is the translation that song was written from, right? Because if you go into other translations, it's going to be significantly different. But this is as close to those lyrics as possible. So this is that moment that David realized he had really, really turned. He had strayed from the path, right? He knew he was chosen by God. He was a fiercest fighter in the history of Israel. He was the chosen king. He was anointed, and yet he stumbled at this late point in his life, and he repented. And when we see that verse, I forget exactly where it is, but we hear of David being a man after God's own heart, right? He was a man after God's own heart, but he murdered his friend and took his wife, right? Like that's not God's own heart, but it's the response when he's confronted with the truth, right? The response when confronted with the truth is having your heart inclined toward God. So I pray to God that there's always someone in my life to speak to me like Nathan the prophet, right? Like Nathan the prophet. And spouses fill that role, and then good friends, but we need to submit ourselves to a body of believers. And I haven't mentioned this in a while, but I need to emphasize this. If you're not, yes, this is fellowship. You guys gathered here. We are like, a small, microcosm of the global church. So, we love each other and we can hold each other accountable. I'm trying to hold you accountable by, spending the time in the Word. You guys are holding each other accountable. I know, like, where's Bonnie? Where's Mom? Where is she? That's you guys holding her accountable. Why isn't she in here? And wondering where everybody else is, and praying for one another and sharing. Right. So we have that here, but there's no replacement for physical proximity, being physically with one another. I know a lot of you hear this and it goes in one ear and out the other, and they're like, forget it. Yeah, find a mentor. Good. Thank you, Lucas. Find someone who, it doesn't matter how old you are, right? Find somebody who's that you would say might be closer to God, right, than you, right? They're or more knowledgeable or have, and a mentor isn't always a vertical relationship. It can be a horizontal relationship, and that's what accountability partners are. I have had people in my life like that at different times that spoke into my life that I regarded their relationship with God very highly and their understanding of Scripture very highly, and so I would go to them with questions and insights, and that's what pastors are for. That's what elders are for, and that's what good godly brothers and sisters are for. And being, where are you going to find them? At a church, right? Oh, I don't want to go to that church. You got to find a church, right? Every church has its problems, but we need to find believers. We need to be in physical connection with believers. There, enough of that. Skip to the oops, skipped. Oh, mom, I was singing. You heard I was singing. I sang. That's what you missed. You'll have to go back and listen to it. This will be posted later. Well, thank you, Lucas. Yeah, I know that I I hold that here. I'll just put that up. I'm not able to spend the time that I have in the past reading comments, etc. But I know I've seen, for example, there's one guy that was in the comment section on Sweet Home Maricopa that I don't remember exactly what I was talking about, but he was a black guy. He told me, his image was there, and I was talking about. Oh, I remember what I was talking about. The statistic um, that a lot of the black community are converting to Republican and seeing the light. And when I was talking about that, I realized, oh, it's things that I'm doing. I'm speaking the truth. And this guy he says, yes, it was me. Like he said, it was me and what's his name? Foreman, the guy from Black Conservative Perspective. It's a YouTube channel. He says it was you and that guy that red pilled me. I'm like, well, it's an honor, right? And so I know I am an influence on people, and I take that soberly. And I mean, I want to be an influence. I want to point people to Jesus, right? And that's why you guys are here. We're here fellowshipping and listening to the word together. And some of the things I say are helpful and insightful, and I want to be used. But we don't rely on me, right? There's some people closer to you as well. So, all right, that's all. I'm going to finish some of the comments that I didn't get to, and then talk about the update. We'll do the update at the end here. There's always stuff going on, always stuff to update you on. All right, so let's scroll back. This is the Bible Every Morning Overflow, and I left off at Timothy. I did get to Psalm 51, but I skipped some stuff. So at Timothy, Second Timothy or First Timothy chapter 2. All right, I'm just gonna say. Here's the thing I was gonna say. This is that passage that can be, you know, controversial, or some will say, "See, this is hate. This is why the Bible. We shouldn't listen to the Bible because it's archaic and hate speech or whatever." Right? Like right here where it says, "Let the woman learn quietly. I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority." And then it says, "She will be saved through childbearing, if they continue in faith, love, holiness, with self-control." It's like these statements in today's culture. You read those statements in today's culture, and I'm willing to wager that you, godly women here listening, even you feel some kind of resistance when you just hear those words. I'm not going to explain this, right? I'm not. You can go do your research, and I could, but that's not my point I'm making right now. Uh, I do not permit a woman to teach over a man, etc. Let a woman learn quietly with the submissiveness, right? In verse 11, it's like, whoa, even good godly women, but because we're raised in this culture and these times, even you may feel that resistance to, wait, what's that? That's patriarchy, or that's archaic, that's old fashioned. But that's that in itself is the lies of the enemy encroaching in the gospel. There's nothing about this that is evil. There's nothing about these phrases and statements that are ungodly or that are somehow making women inferior, right? And that's the temptation to think, well, see, this is putting men in a higher position and men superior to women. It's like, no, it's not. Women are superior at certain things and men are superior at certain things. And we all know this, right? God designed us differently. Men are born with muscle mass and more muscle mass and more bone density, right? So we're superior at things that require physical strength, superior, right? And women are superior at more well, I don't know. I don't know all the things that men and women are superior or inferior at. But all I want to address is that feeling of coming across this literature, this ancient literature, and how our culture has so indoctrinated us for I would say probably the majority of women that come across this would have that feeling, that sensation that this is old fashioned. The Bible needs to be updated, right? The theology changes over time. No, theology doesn't change. This is just an emphasis on some of the differences. And I'm not going to get into the details. I'm pointing that out. Mhm. Let's see. All right. So moving on to Daniel, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time in Daniel. We'll get to the update sooner rather than later. So Daniel chapter 9, verse 8. Daniel's praying, let's see, in the year, verse 1, in the first year of Darius. So this is after the changing of the guard, right? So there was Nebuchadnezzar and then Darius, right? Daniel served under these two different rulers, and making who was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans in the first year of his reign. I, Daniel, perceived in the books the numbers of years according to the word of the Lord. So he's reading the book of Jeremiah. So Daniel has access to the prophet, the writings of the prophet Jeremiah, and he's recognizing a prophecy, right? The end of desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. And Daniel is recognizing he is within that time frame that Jeremiah was talking about. And then he turned his face to the Lord in verse 3 and prayed. And he's essentially he's repenting for his people. And in verse 8, he says, "To us, O Lord, belongs open shame." In verse 8, "To us, O Lord, belongs open shame, to our kings, to our princes, and to our fathers, because we have sinned against you." And that line right there, verse 8, is our prayer. To us, O Lord, belong open shame. The United States of America, to us belongs open shame. To our kings, presidents, governors, mayors, senators, congress people, to them, because we have sinned against you. And this is a prayer that we need to all pray regularly. And here Daniel is praying earnestly. And then he gets visited again. Like Daniel has these encounters. I mean, and this is the beginning of some prophecies about the coming of Jesus, right? This is, I think in the next chapter, right, this is where the 70 weeks of years, and it's a time frame that is locked into scripture, right? This is Daniel, a prophet of God, hearing from God, and God is giving him a schedule, right? God is giving him an outline of things to come. And he's been like Nebuchadnezzar had a dream of the different kings that come. Daniel's had a parallel dream of rulers and kingdoms to come, right? And God is revealing to Daniel this schedule. And unfortunately, in certain sectors of evangelicalism, in particularly in America, in Western Christianity, they get right up to the 69th year, and they go, that last week of years, that last week of 7 years, there's a gap, right? There's this pause because that last 7 years is the tribulation, the great tribulation, right? Like Daniel prophesied, and he was right up until the 69th week. Then there's that last week of years, which is another 7 years. that's going to be the tribulation, and then midway through that seventh week or 3.5 years in is right, all these things. But according to Daniel's chronology, there's no gap, right? At this point, that gap is 2,000 years long, right? From the coming of Christ until today. And people think, oh, yeah, that last week of years, that tribulation, that 7-year tribulation, because this is the only place that 7-year thing happens, right? There, in Revelation, it doesn't talk about 7 years, right? It's all taken from this, from Daniel, right? It's people reading into scripture. Well, it must be this and it must be that, and let's point these things together. No, there's no gap. That last week of years is the coming of Christ and the destruction of the temple, right? The judgment that's talked about, that tribulation, even that John talks about in the present tense. John says that we are going through the tribulation. John says it in present tense, the tribulation that I am going through with you, right? That tribulation was the fall of Jerusalem. It was the destruction of the Jewish cult, the Jewish religion, the Jewish belief system, the Jewish sacrificial system. It was their whole universe. Everything in their universe, heavens and the earth, right? That's the metaphor that's always used. The heavens and the earth is their entire belief system was destroyed, came crashing down with the temple, as Jesus prophesied it would. Not one stone will remain upon another. So Daniel's prophecy is fulfilled in the destruction of Jerusalem there. All right, now the update. Okay. So it's moving forward. So I had my trip to Fresno. I met with some important people in Fresno on Saturday. The head of Armenian studies at Fresno State University, and then also another guy. So Fresno's a heavily, it's a hub of Armenian. There are pockets of Armenians around the world, obviously in Armenia and right across the border into Russia and Georgia over there, lots of Armenians. But then Glendale, California currently is the next largest concentration of Armenians. But before it was Glendale, it was Fresno. So 100 years ago, Fresno was the largest accumulation of Armenians. So there's a lot of history there. William Saroyan, famous poet, playwright, author, novelist, is Armenian and is buried there. And I visited his grave site on Saturday. But fast forwarding from Saturday to last night. So I've been intentionally reaching out to more and more influential Armenians in this networking process. And so last night I met with 2 Armenian podcasters, and they have separate podcasts. And one of them is really focused on history, and the other one is focused on current events and culture, etc. And so they know each other, they're friends, they have separate podcasts, but I met with them. Yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Let me. So we have behind me, this is used to be Armenia. Now Armenia is just this little piece over here, but most of this was Armenia. In the time of Jesus, all of this was Armenia, right? That's how far back. And as of like 2 weeks before Hamas attacked Gaza, 2 weeks before that, Azerbaijan attacked an Armenian community, and 100,000 Armenians were displaced. So it's continuing, right? The geographic territory of the first Christian nation, right? Grasp that in your mind. The geographic territory of the first Christian nation. First of all, the first Christian nation still exists, right? As Christians, this is one of the points that I need to be getting across to Christians. Like, you Christians, you don't know anything about your history. Yeah, you go to the Old Testament, you go to the New Testament, then you're done. But the church was born in the New Testament, and there's a lot that God has been doing from that point on. And how many of you know anything about what God has been doing in the church for the last 2,000 years? Nothing, right? Well, there were popes and stuff. We know there was a Protestant Reformation, a couple of things. But the first Christian nation, Armenia, 301 AD, the first Christian nation was born, and it was huge, right? It was a huge territory. And it still exists, but it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Right? World War One, it shrank dramatically because it was within the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottomans massacred all of the Christians. 1.5 million Armenians, 300,000 Greeks, 200,000 Assyrians, Christians, right? It was a Christian Holocaust that included the Armenian genocide. And just 2.5 months ago, that tiny territory that still exists of the first Christian nation got even smaller. And that should be front page news around the world, and every church on every headline, and every one of us should be paying very close attention to what's happening in Armenia. Yet nobody even knows Armenia exists. 2.4 billion Christians, the vast majority of them have never heard of an Armenian. Well, they've heard of Kim Kardashian, but they don't register. That's the first Christian nation. All right. So I get on my soapbox, but that's why I'm doing that. That's why I'm here. This is what this is about, is drawing attention to what God is doing. And God is drawing attention to Armenia. Soghomon Tehlirian is a saint. Sorry, I gotta get focused here. So last night I met with 2 Armenian podcasters, and let's just say I can tell a lot about an Armenian based on how they respond to this. When I hold this up, when I tell them what this is, and I bring it out and I hand it to them, and I watch, and I watch. Hi, Dave. Thanks, Dave. Good to see you, Dave. I know you've contacted Gina. I need to get you. Actually, I need to get you on a Wednesday. Let's do that. Let's book it, Dave. You and I. All right. So back to it. So I can tell a lot about an Armenian, where they are, where they stand, what their understanding is of history, what their understanding is of Soghomon Tehlirian. When I tell them what this is and I hand it to them, and the way they handle it. And last night, this is how they handled it. They received it like this. I don't even want to touch it. I'm like, I don't read Armenian, but just to hold one that I know Soghomon Tehlirian held in his hands. That's what happened last night to both of these podcasters. They treated this with the proper reverence. This is a one-off, right? There were hundreds of these printed, but only one of them was still in the possession of Soghomon Tehlirian and his family. And then they gave it to me. So these guys were floored, blown away. In fact, they didn't even know it existed. They didn't even know this existed until last night. And both of these podcasters, now keep in mind, these are podcasters. These are guys who are on the air every week. They do it once a week. They have a live, like 2-hour podcast, long form. And they have their built-in audience of mostly Armenians, right? And they're both going to have me on their podcast. And this is the beginning of, like, what I'm saying is we're launching the public facing of this project. I gave them, right, the lookbook that I've shown you guys. This thing here this is the prototype that will be available for purchase soon. These are the autographed ones. I got 26 of them made, autographed by Soghomon's son right there. I don't know if I even showed you this. I got it autographed on November 16th. I got all 26 of them, 25 of them autographed. I missed one, but I'll go back and get that one. But these are designed for the investors once we get to the investment, and they are numbered, right? This is my personal copy. This is 21 of 26. And I gave them number 20. I gave it to them. They said, we'll give it back to you. I'm like, you know what? The way you guys are talking, I know you are already invested. You already want to help. So and then we just do it out of love. We just do it out of love for this thing. And I'm like, well, I'm giving this to you out of love because you're already recommending who I should reach out to. And you're going to do everything you can to help, because they go on the air once a week with different guests. And so I'm booked for one of them. It'll be January 11th. And then they also want my historian on. So the week after that, they're going to have my historian on as a guest. And then I haven't been booked on the other podcast yet, but they'll figure it out. So that was last night, meeting with 2 Armenian podcasters who are all in. And they kept saying at the end, they kept saying, thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you for what you're doing. And when I hear that, I can't help but it's like, when they say thank you, I don't feel guilty. I feel like you don't need to thank me because I can't do anything else. And that's what I said. I can't help it. This is all I'm about. Like my life has changed. This is what I'm focused on. I believe this is God's calling on my life. I didn't say all of those things, but I did say, I'm like, I can't help it. But and then when we were leaving in the parking lot, they said it again. We just thank you for what you're doing. And I realized I just had to say, well, thank you for thanking me. Just have to accept the thanks. I have to accept the praise, right? It's mind-boggling and baffling to them, but they're excited and they can see my excitement. In fact, so one of the real important things that I think is coming of this um, this meeting was that the podcast that I'm going to be on the 11th, and I'll let you guys know. I'll tell you when that is. It'll be it'll be a Thursday, the 11th. It's the 11th. The guy's going to send me a list of questions because you guys know how I am. Like you ask me a question, I'll go off. I'll go on a tangent. I'll go in this direction and that direction. Then I won't remember where I started, and I'll be like, "What should I finish the story or whatever?" Like you know how I am because I've been working on this for so long. There's so much to say, so much to tell them, and they got a dose. They got a fire hose dose for an hour last night. I will post a link, absolutely. Um, uh, I'm reading your comments, trying to finish my thought. So that guy, he's like, okay, now what we have to do is get you to get focused in a focused linear progression of storytelling. And they understand that I'm a storyteller. They understand that podcasts are about telling stories. So I've got 1,000 stories to tell. Figure out which one to tell first, second, third, fourth, fifth. So what he's going to do is send a list of questions, and good podcasting host, right, to guide the narrative. All right, for the first hour, we're going to talk about you and your story. We're going to talk about how who you are, how you got into the line of work you're in, and what you're about. And then in the second hour, we'll tie it into Sogmo Talarian, and then right, and that's perfect, right? And what it is, we're going to hone my message for the book tour, right? This first podcast will be part of that. He's going to send me the list of questions. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to write them out. I'm going to write my bullet points, the thing, so that I can get focused, because I'm one man trying to do the job of 1,000 people right now. And the more people that come in are going to be helpful. And last night I got 2 new team members, right? 2 people added to the team, these 2 Armenian podcasters. I'm just so grateful. And they're like, "Oh, you need to reach out to this guy." And one of them goes, "I'll tell you guys this." He said, because I can't gauge necessarily. I knew one of the guys is conservative. I had information from the guy who connected me to him. This one guy that I've been meeting with, this one Armenian guy, he's very, very liberal, right? He's kind of leftist, liberal Armenian, but he's very like he knows a lot of people. And when I talk about Armenian stuff, it doesn't matter what his politics are. We're you ignore those things and rise above them. And he says, "Well, I was on this podcast, and I think they're like MAGA guys or something." And when I heard that, I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." Give me their contact information. So I knew one of them, the one podcaster he connected me to was, and the guy says, "I don't know if I'm center, but I'm certainly, Joe Biden didn't get 81 million votes, right?" So I could talk to that guy at that level. The other guy, I didn't know. He's a totally different podcast. And I asked this guy, I'm like, "Is that guy conservative?" He's like, "I don't know. We'll find out." Well, that guy, he goes, "You know who you should reach out to? Glenn Beck." I was like, "Oh, okay." And he says, "Well, Glenn Beck, has a lot of people. He's aware of what's going on with Armenia. He's one of those guys who's very focused on that." Glenn Beck was one of the guys who actually was he's one of the people, the movie Sound of Freedom. Glenn Beck was one of the original guys that spurred that movement on to tell that story. So Glenn Beck. So these, like I'm saying, these guys, when they recommend, they also mentioned 2 Armenian guys that I need to connect with. They're going to connect me with one of them. Another one, they don't have his information, but I might through work. Actually, there's a famous Armenian that I've come across in my work. And I'm like, yeah, I should probably reach out to him. And they said last night, absolutely, get in touch with that guy. Serena Williams' husband, the tennis star Serena Williams. She's married to an Armenian guy who's very influential. And his grandfather or his father just passed away. And so he's in this traumatic moment, trying to preserve his family history. And they said, now's probably a good time for you to reach out to him. So pray for me to reach out to that guy, Serena Williams' husband. Love you guys. See you tomorrow. Time's up.